Welcome to this Roundup. Artificial intelligence is proving to be a pivotal technology for human progress and advancement. As artificial intelligence brings a profound and lasting shift in the nature of information and intelligence, the demystification of patterns is rapidly shifting the relative balance of political, economic, and security power. As seen, AI, that means artificial intelligence, has leveled the information intelligence and innovation playing field for nations. As a result, understanding the broader trends of the resulting fundamental transformation across nations and all its components has become essential. To discuss the AI trends for 2020 further, I'm delighted to welcome Pablo Breuer to this roundup. Pablo is an innovation officer at Donovan Group. He's a highly accomplished and decorated executive cybersecurity technology and innovation professional. And in his prior positions, he has been a lecturer at California State University. He has also been chief of Advanced Threats Branch, executive director of the Center for Information Warfare and Innovation, and he's based in the United States. Welcome, Pablo. We are so very honored to have you in this roundup.
Thanks so much for having me.
So wonderful. So Pablo, so from your assessment, where is AI taking us? What are the AI trends that you see broadly that we should be watching out for in 2020?
AI is kind of interesting. AI perennially comes back about every 15 years. The last time it was really in vogue was in the late 90s, where we talked about expert systems. And what's changed between now and then is the ability to access large amounts of information and automate the way in which we train those AI systems. So we're reaching kind of the top of the Gartner hype cycle. What I see artificial intelligence doing in the next 3 or 4 years is we're going to get better about deciding what kind of questions we can ask AI, use it to help guide human beings into making better decisions. But I think we're going to back away from letting artificial intelligence make decisions for us. So I think it's going to be a person in the loop trend as opposed to an automated trend without a person in the loop.
That's very interesting. So you see that, we the humans have come to a conclusion that it's better that we stay in the loop to take decisions and not let the AI algorithms take the decisions for us. Is that the trend that you see?
I think that's the trend. And if you look at particularly medical, what they've started to do with AI in medical is they're using AI to look at images, so to identify cancer and tumors and those kind of things. But they still have a doctor. They might have the AI highlight it, but they have a doctor verify and say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree with it. And that's in large part because the stakes are so high. Anytime that you're dealing with the health of a person, you really want to have a person in the loop, but also because there's some fundamental computational limits to what Turing machines can do, and therefore what artificial intelligence machines running on Turing machines can do.
So do you see the possibility that once we overcome those computing challenges, then we will be able to have much more, control over the training and, the whatever other, variables that we need to make sure that the AI has to be able to take better intelligent decisions that it will be able to take, because as we see, conversational AI is moving forward, rapidly. And because of the conversational AI, what you just said, that, the interaction, what kind of questions we can ask, AI algorithms, all that is making a much more difference, and it's getting better. And that is the difference that we see before the other AI revolution that we see a decade ago, and between that and now, because now we have much more control, we have much more data, as you just mentioned, because everything is digitizing, everyone and everything is getting on the internet, and the connectivity and the presence, the digital presence, is giving us a lot more data from across nations. Now, it's unfortunate that a lot of nations are, starting to think of creating digital walls, because what that will do is that the digital walls is going to create a barrier in how much data we can access from across nations. So if we are looking at, broadly about the human species, human civilization, what kind of problems we can solve using all the data that we will have access to, that is getting a little bit more, challenging now, because, the nations are going inwards and they are trying to control their own data. So that is, in my assessment, I think that is going to be a problem if we are looking at, trying to find answers to understand using the AI intelligence. to understand the patterns of the from the global data. That could be a challenge. Do you see, where do you see the digital walls that are being created? Where do you see that taking us in our AI journey? Because there is a lot of promise with AI, but it seems that digital walls and barriers are going to create obstacles for us.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of challenges with artificial intelligence, and there was a fantastic book written by Cathy O'Neill called "Weapons of Math Destruction." Weapons of mathematics destruction. And she talks very eloquently and very simply about some of the problems with artificial intelligence. One of the problems with artificial intelligence is you have to make sure that you have unbiased data to feed into heuristic, and then you have to make sure that your heuristic is in and of itself unbiased. And this is something that's tremendously difficult. So much so that we end up with results that on the surface make sense, but they lead to unintended consequences, which leads to the second problem of AI, which is right now we don't have what's called explainable AI. We can see the information that went into the artificial intelligence heuristic, and we can see the decision that was made at the other end, but we can't go back and go, why did this input result in this output? And so when you look at something as simple as self-navigating cars or autopilots cars, invariably there's going to be an accident. And so there's going to have to be some sort of an investigation that happens that says, why did this accident happen? Was there bad data? Was it a bad decision that was made? Was the heuristic model bad? And right now there's no way to investigate that, which is why I suggest that at least for the near future, we're going to have a human on the loop so that the AI can make suggestions, but the human ultimately makes the decision. And even if you look at cutting edge technologies like the Tesla autopilot, they say that the human is still driving. They don't suggest that you fall asleep while the artificial intelligence is driving. As far as warfare does, my own personal opinion, I think automated wars would be a horrifying thing. And I think it would lead to a state of perpetual warfare. I think the reason we go to warfare because we decide that the losses incurred in war are less than the losses if we don't go to war. So it's really kind of a survival instinct. And we stop fighting when we realize that the losses are so horrific that we're no longer willing to pay that cost. Well, if there's no human life cost, there's no incentive to stop warring. And so we just end up in this perpetual warfare state. If anything, I would tell you that I think that warfare has gotten a little too clean and a little too distant. I would humbly suggest that if we're still dealing with the horrors of personal warfare and hand-to-hand combat like we did in World War I, that we wouldn't be in a state where we've been at war now for 20 plus years.
Yes, I hear you. I agree with you on that. I mean, the warfares are evolving rapidly. But before we talk about the warfare, the other point that you made about the integrity of the algorithms, that whether the data that we are getting, the information that we are getting and we are feeding to the AI algorithms, whether that is biased or not biased, whether that there is integrity in that data, that is one of the biggest challenges that, the advances for, based on AI is going to face, because at this point we have no control over it. The data that is being created in an enormous capacity on the social media and on other sites, we have absolutely no way to know the integrity and credibility of the data. So in the book that I just finished writing, it will probably come out by the end of this month or probably beginning of next month. But that is something, I have proposed in that, we need a solution, and I have suggested a solution, what kind of solution we should prepare so that we have a control over the integrity of any of the data that, we are feeding to algorithms, not only algorithms, but even the data that, human reads. Everybody reads everything that is on the internet, and there is no way to know that what we are reading is a deepfake news or deepfake, whether what we are watching is deepfake video or audio or listening to audio. Are these all, credible? Because there is no way, the boundaries are blurring between right and wrong and truth and fake. So we need some sort of control over that. Otherwise, we have no idea what kind of impact, what damage it would do to not only just, the decision-making process or decisions, but also also on the human mind and psychology. So that is something we need to address, and I have addressed that in my book, and I hope that we can have a debate on that in the coming months. But the other point that you just made about the warfare, and it is very true that this AI driven warfare, if we leave it to just that, we have no idea, or we have no way of knowing where it will land, because now the cyberspace has connected aquaspace, geospace, and space. All these spaces are connected, and it has connected individuals and entities across nations, its government, industries, organizations, and academia. So if you look at all these connectivity, and if the AI algorithm, we let them, decide the warfare, then we have no way of knowing where the warfare will land. And that is something we have to be concerned at this point also, because now, as we see in cyberspace, because of the enormous complexity of the cybersecurity risks that are coming towards us, and also the AI-driven cybersecurity challenges that are coming. AI is beginning to be used for the cybersecurity, offense and defense both. So as the weapons are being developed using, AI, and cyber weapons are being developed using AI, and even the defense techniques and offensive techniques are, driven by AI. We are already seeing, in the beginning stages of the warfare, AI warfare that is happening in cyberspace. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, I think at some point there's going to be an instant we're going to have to reevaluate. The problem with the data set going in is even if you take malfeasance out of it, even in academic settings where researchers, trained PhDs in research go out and collect data, they collect data knowing that they've had to make certain allowances to reduce their sample size, and knowing that they've had to take certain things for granted. And those things typically get documented in their own research paper. Later on, another researcher comes along from a different field and sees this huge data trove, and they use it for different research without necessarily fully understanding what assumptions were made when the data was collected and what the intended purpose was. And so that can lead to unintended bias. The other thing is that, and I don't want to get through a deep dark hole of epistemic discussions, but truth with a capital T, universal truth, is really non-existent. And so things that are true from one vantage point are not true from another. There were some really interesting results based out of China when they try to come up with facial recognition based upon their assumptions of what people look like, given their genetic background, and using that in other parts of the world where the primary genetic pool was not Chinese. And so that led to really interesting results. And it's not because they intended to be biased, but their sampling was just not correct for the intended use case. So certainly you have those issues, and there are, all sorts of unintended biases when you develop the heuristics. As far as the cyber warfare, I hesitate to use the term cyber warfare, but DARPA a few years ago had the DARPA Grand Challenge that they ran at Defcon, which was automated vulnerability discovery and patching. So certainly these AIs are dual use. They can be used for good as much as they can be used for bad. And so one of the things that's required, and unfortunately I see it far too few universities, is a requirement for ethics. I think that engineers and scientists, particularly in technology, have been really great about asking, how can we do X? I think very few of them have stopped to ask, should we do X? Or if I develop X, how could it be misused and abused? And how do I put in baseline protections? I mean, certainly in hindsight, again, not wanting to pick on anybody in particular, but Facebook, if you're developing a social media site that you want college students and middle school students and high school students to use, if you're a parent, it's easier to foresee that kids are going to use that to bully each other. The fact that that hadn't been considered and there were no baseline protections doesn't speak well of the forethought that went into the engineering of that type of service. And they're by no means the only one. We have similar problems with AI. We have similar problems with gene editing, cyber, pretty much any area of research where technology has evolved. We've asked, how can we, without asking, should we?
True, very true. That question is so very essential. And the point that you made about China and that you brought up the facial recognition technology, I'm glad you did that because if we look at these and also the Facebook, they are all fitting in this together. In the point that I'm trying to make is that surveillance, all these AI driven surveillance technologies that we have developed. There was a time that surveillance was only done by governments. They only had the power to do that. The technology and the resources only the governments had, and only they had the power to do the surveillance. Now, any private industry, any private company like Facebook or Apple or anyone, they all can do surveillance. So, at point, we know that the surveillance is not going to end up into sabotage because all these things are connected. It's only the intent. Like if China, is the government is monitoring everyone through facial recognition technology. They are doing surveillance at a level that it is unprecedented. And now, if anybody wants to harm any citizen that is trying to speak up against them, or that's going to be a problem and they want to eliminate, then it's very easy for them to sabotage in many ways, not just by killing that person, but also destroying that person in so many different ways. So the boundaries between surveillance and sabotage, they are all blurring very rapidly. And if China is an authoritarian nation, so their laws and the way of governance are very different. But if you look at the countries like United States, we have here democracy, and if what China is doing, or if that and what Facebook and other companies are trying to do here, if government tries to do that, then we would say that there will be a huge public backlash. That government is overreaching their boundaries, and they are trying to have all this mass surveillance. But now we already have mass surveillance, and that is dictated by the private industry, and everybody is willingly giving their data without thinking of the consequences. So that isn't that a troubling trend that we are seeing, that the surveillance trend, and especially the AI driven facial recognition technology, and AI is getting integrated into everything. So it's not just the facial recognition technology, but any algorithm, and the blockchain algorithm, or any 5G algorithm, anything that can do surveillance now, because the 5G is also a huge challenge coming towards us. If we use other countries 5G technology, that it's going to be integrated into all the IoT devices across cyberspace, across space, geospace space, and everything is going to be vulnerable, everything will be at risk, because we don't know what commands are going to be given to that algorithm if we are using other countries 5G technology. So how do we prevent those kind of risks coming our way?
Yeah, those are all excellent points. That goes back to Silicon Valley, and the engineers haven't done a good job asking, should we, instead of how can we? So one of the talks I've been given of late is about how powers that used to only belong to nation states now belong to individual citizens. So if you get into national decision making and strategy, you're often taught about what we call the instruments of national power. And the instruments of national power are those levers that a nation state can use to affect another nation state. Canonically, they're known as the DIME model, so diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. So if you take these independently, I'll leave the diplomatic alone for the actually, let's talk about the diplomatic. There are virtual countries right now, such as BitNation. BitNation has no physical territory yet, has, at this point, I believe, over 40 embassies around the world, will issue birth certificates, death certificates, marriage license, and so forth on the blockchain. They are recognized by other governments, such as Estonia. So this is, again, without territory. There's this virtual nation that has a power that used to formerly belong to only a nation state. Informational, the ability to reach a mass populace. In the 1980s, if you wanted to reach the whole of the American populace, you had better be the president of the United States, and you would go to, the three big networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC at the time, and say, look, you're going to put my address on at 7 p.m. on Monday night, or I'm going to pull your license to transmit. Well, now we live in a world where Katy Perry reaches twice as many people as the President of the United States and 50 times the number of people as the Prime Minister of Britain, just by going through social media. and she answers to nobody. She doesn't have a suite of advisors that say, don't say this because it'll be misinterpreted in this part of the world. Then when you go to the economic, the ability to print money used to belong to a nation state. Well, now we have cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and Dogecoin and Ethereum. All of these things are not based on governments or countries. They are based upon cryptographic algorithms. So again, the power to print money and assign value to that now belongs to individual citizens. Economic is the last one that's left. But as you pointed out, there are ways to automate intelligence for warfare. There are ways to automate intelligence for cyber warfare. And so those things are going away. And it might be time for the world as a whole to come together and go and reevaluate what it means to be a nation state, what it means to be at warfare or not at warfare, what it means to have a peer or a near peer that you interact with on a nation state level. So certainly those things are of concern. Going back to the informational bit, one of the things that's gained a lot of traction in the last year is the use of deep fakes or fake videos. That is particularly problematic, and the reason it's particularly problematic is we're rapidly approaching the point where the ability to create those deep fakes is going to be democratized. And what I mean by that is currently, if you want to create a really convincing deep fake, you're probably going to have to be a Hollywood studio or somebody with that level of knowledge and several $100,000 worth of equipment. In the next 5 years, you're going to be able to do it on your cell phone or on your laptop. And so the ability to create a deep fake where a world leader says or does the things that they wouldn't say or do and puts it on social media to tell a disinformation narrative are coming. And the problem with that is not just that they're convincing, but once somebody sees that, since they're already predestined to believe it, they're already pre-biased to believe it, not only do you have to get over the cognitive friction, but in order to explain to them that it's fake, you're going to have to explain some very deep science concepts. And most people aren't going to understand those deep science concepts. And so if you're a government and a deep fake of your president or your prime minister gets put up and you put your chief science advisor to explain all of the reasons in the metadata that these are that indicate that this is a fake, most people are going to look at it and go, well, I didn't believe the government to begin with. Now you're just trying to fool me. I know what I saw and I know what I heard. And so now's the time to start having those discussions and get ahead of those things before they really cause some substantive problems.
No, I think you made some very excellent points, because those problems are very real. And the point that you made about the influence, who is influencing now, the examples that you gave, anybody with a large social media account, without that person, I'm not talking about any individual here, but we do not know what that person says and how much vetting is done, like you just mentioned about, and what the thoughts are, what is the agenda behind saying that. Is it just to sell some product? Is it just to get more followers? But what is being said, there is no accountability of that. And if we are seeing now, I think the democratization of the destruction is already there. Cyberspace has given that power to pretty much every individual who has a computer and a internet connectivity to be able to do whatever that person wants to do. You can create, if you look at the outer layers of cyberspace, you can create constructive applications that would benefit the humanity, or you can create destructive viruses, malwares, or anything, and try to destroy any nation. And if you look at synthetic biology, then you can take bits and pieces of genes from any place, and any organism, any animal, plant, and whatever, or some gene banks, and the rest of the code, brilliant computer scientists can write and create an entirely new pathogen. Democratization of destruction and do-it-yourself movement, they have brought us so many challenges that we have no capability, at least at this point, to be able to know who is developing what, and whether those applications that are being developed or any other projects that people are working on in their basement, in garage, or whatever, that that is going to benefit, that is for the benefit of the humanity or benefit of the nations. They have no way to know that. So when the democratization of destruction is ongoing and is so rapid and so rampant, we are still depending for the governance of security challenges only from the government. And when rest of the power is shifting. How can we, depend only on government to be able to be or for the accountability of the security risks that are coming our way? And how can even governments and military control all these, destructive power that is coming our way? Because the power is shifting, the ability to do all these things is shifting. And we still depend only on the government and military for, them to protect us.
Yeah, so those are all very tough challenges, and there's a fine line between being cautious and your regulation and putting out protective measures and stifling innovation. And so that's a careful balance. One of the problems that we have is often the legislators aren't knowledgeable enough about what they're legislating. And there's just too much out there for them to know. So what we really need is a nonpartisan office in government with a pool of subject matter experts and with a network, an even larger network of subject matter experts, so that as Congress and other legislators think about how they're going to regulate artificial intelligence, that they can hear from nonpartisan experts on here are the concerns and here are the pros and here's the cons. Unfortunately, what's happening now is when we get that strictly either from partisan players because they've been appointed by whoever was voted in, or you get industry and they have their own bias because they want to be allowed to run their product out as quickly as possible and make a maximum amount of profit with a minimum amount of regulation. And so there's got to be a balance. I think we've gone a little bit too far to the let anything happen, we need to come back. In the late 90s, the internet industry convinced the U.S. Congress that they should not be regulated like a media because it would stifle innovation. And the result of that is when you see a political ad on television or radio, or you hear one on radio, you have to be told who paid for it. When you see that same ad on Facebook or on a website, you have no idea who's paying for it because there's no legal requirement to let you know. Maybe it's time to go back and re-examine those kind of rules and say, hey, listen, media used to be television and radio. Now media is television and radio and the internet. I think that news organizations should go back and ask themselves if they would rather be right or first. We've had several incidents where professional journalists who are fine professionals in a rush to be the first haven't done the fact checking that we're accustomed to and have put out bad information. Addition to that, then we've got some nefarious actors. So we were talking before we got into this interview that we just came out of a situation where it looked like we might go to war with Iran. One of the interesting things that happened yesterday was that several legitimate journalists' social media accounts were hacked, and several legitimate news organizations' accounts were hacked, and they put out false information towards one side. So how do you prevent that? How do you do a retraction? Because in a time and date of instant gratification, you have to have a way to slow things down so that you can verify that they're true, or at least get out ahead and go, oh, something got put out that's not quite true. I need to get to this before it gets to the proverbial presses, and people take action on those things. So certainly this isn't a technology problem. This is a people problem enabled by technology, and we need to look for people solutions.
It's very true, and that those are very complex challenges, because if you look at this, we are advancing rapidly with the human-computer interfaces and brain-computer interfaces. I mean, the example that you gave is still a very, I would say primitive, that somebody hacked the account and the information was put out that was looking one-sided, and but actually, if there is a warfare happening using some technology, going towards mind control technologies, and then that is not happening at this point. I just want to make sure that people don't get afraid when they listen to this. But in the future, these are futuristic scenarios that we are talking about. Strategic security, is all about visualizing what could happen in the coming years, and if these interfaces are developing rapidly, and then there is there is no way we can guarantee the security of those interfaces, because then those interfaces could be used for both good and bad. And once it is, since the beginning of the discussion, we have been talking about this, that once that information gets into any human mind, even if we give them all scientific evidence, all the data to prove that it was wrong, once the information has got into them, they will believe what they want to believe, and it's impossible to change that narrative. Even now, the truth is only in the human being's mind, irrespective of whether that truth is truth or whether that is falsehood. But what we want to believe, we just believe that. So once all that information is already out there and the manipulation is already going off human mind, it is very difficult for any technology to change that, or any narrative to change that human narrative. So how we will control that mass, indoctrination of those ideas and all that, those are very complex challenges. And that is why when we, launched Risk Group, I made sure that we are going to stay totally non-partisan. We do not belong to any political ideology. I am an independent. I don't support any political ideology, because as a risk professional, as a strategic security risk professional, our only goal is to look out for the future of the humanity, and we want to make sure that we don't let any of the bias influence our decision-making process. And the point that you made is excellent, that we do need an office that looks at all these issues in a non-partisan way and gives the recommendation how to even regulate, because regulating blockchain, regulating AI and all that is not going to be an easy challenge, because when we have democratization of destruction, the democrat is we have to come up with new models. And I have proposed a model in my book, but we will talk about that in future episode. We need a new way, we need new systems, we need a new way of looking at the things, how we can control, how we can govern all these emerging technologies, because now we are not in a time frame where we get one disruptive technology and for 100 years we don't see another disruptive technology. We are going to witness so many disruptive technologies every now and then, and this is just the beginning. So we do need a new way of looking at all these problems. And while the progress is good about the data privacy and all, but still it is solutions that are emerging from Europe, they are not going to make any dent in the security, because any solution that comes without integration of the security is never going to work. And all these solutions are developed in silo, and we need to come up with an entirely new way of handling that. So having said that, how do you see we talked enough about the risk and warfare and the challenges, but how do you see the human society evolving beyond 2020? Where do you see this going? If you look at just only the benefits, we talked enough about the challenges. Let's talk about the benefit and positive things, that this technology advances can bring us.
Sure. So there's lots of advantages. First of all, I think that there's going to be a societal change. We're really still in kind of the early stages of this technological society that we're in. And in a lot of ways, we're kind of like kids with a new toy. We've got a technology and we just want to use it. We don't necessarily know what for, but we want to use it. I think we're going to get better about deciding what problems technology can help us solve, what problems technology can aid us in, and what problems we really shouldn't use technology for. So none of these problems are what I like to call silver bullet problems, or they're what I like to call 1,000 bullet problems. They require technology and ethics and legal and policy changes and people to start talking to each other and people to put themselves in uncomfortable situations where they listen to views of the opposing side, and they require some societal changes. They also require that we really fundamentally understand where the information is coming from and how it's being collected. So that being said, democratization can be a wonderful thing. We talked about all of the bad things about democratization of destruction, and democratization of creation of misinformation. We have also got the democratization of education. There are fantastic educational opportunities for people to reach world-class education where they might not otherwise have had the opportunity. Telemedicine, democratization of medical care, those things are wonderful. Telecommunications, the ability to reach just about anybody in the world. We really live in a space age time. Imagine going back to the 1950s. and trying to explain to them that in the future they're going to have the ability to hold a device in their hand with which they can access the sum total of human knowledge, and that we use it to send cat videos and memes. It's ludicrous, but that's really the world we live in, where we can sit there disconnected from just about anything and take a device out of our pocket and look up anything. Now, what we're not good at is figuring out if the answer that we're getting when we're looking information up is the correct answer, but I suspect we'll get better. And that's a data provenance issue.
Yes, very true. Now, the points that you made are excellent, because as we move forward, all these amazing advances and the democratization of innovation and knowledge, and platforms that are being created, that they are bringing very transformative, sorry about that, changes for the human society. And yes, we can all, benefit from that. We can all take advantage of that. Now you can just go to Khan Academy and you can learn anything. There are many, websites. I mean, MIT and all these, Stanford, they also have, released all the courses, many of the courses, information, just, on their website, and anybody can access that. So there are a lot of access points, and anybody who has the drive and hunger to know, to learn, then there is no more obstacle. There are no more hurdles for that. Anybody can learn, anybody can educate themselves. So those are all wonderful things that are coming our way. And at the same time, as millions of people, especially the young generation, that is emerging, that is coming out of the high schools, colleges, that want to make a difference. They are all driven, to use these emerging technologies and bring some transformative changes. There is also need for accountability, because the point that you just made about, what problems to solve, I think that is at the heart of, any progress and advancement. And everyone who is trying to get involved, or who is involved into developing innovations, any new idea that is emerging, any imagination that, any individual has, individually or collectively, that we have to look at, the future of the humanity, the future of human species civilization, that what problems we want to solve, and the problems that we want to solve, how should we go there, so that, we can, any solution that we develop, that, we can have the broader of, masses, across nation, not just for one country, but, across the entire, human species. Everybody can adapt that, adopt to that, so that we can bring the positive changes that we want to bring. To say that, what would you like to tell to our global viewers and listeners, how to approach that, what problems to ask, and, how to make a decision on where to, invest the resources, as because you have been doing this for so long. You are heading the organization, for the innovation for the thought leadership for the U.S. Navy and think tank, and you have been seeing the challenges, you are witnessing the challenges. So what would you like to tell those young, brilliant minds, where to focus and where not to get distracted?
Yeah, so just a small clarification. I'm certainly not the head of Navy innovation. I'm just one officer in a think tank working for Special Operations Command. So the first one is surround yourself with brilliant people. The second one is never stop learning. One of the wonderful things about young people is they're not as limited by the biases that most of us collect as we live our lives. My favorite question that I get asked is why. If I get asked how, I usually can explain how something works. In order to answer why, you really have to know how it works, or why not. And so because that's the way we've done it, or because that's the way it works, is usually a weak answer. And what it usually indicates is that you're probably on the right track, and your solution might be another way to do that. One of the wonderful things about the young people is they've grown up in an interconnected world. If you're in Mumbai and you want to talk to somebody in Canada, you can do that. You hop on, Instagram or Wired or Signal or Facebook, and you can do that. That was something that was not available before. And so what you can do is you can draw from a much larger pool of expertise, a much larger experience pool, and from far more multifaceted views than we could in the past. And so that's a real strength. And the fact that you can do that in near instantaneous time is wonderful. So learn from history, learn the mistakes that were made, learn the things that went wrong, but don't be limited by those things. Let them advise you, but don't be limited by the way that things were done in the past. And if you can dream it up, you can probably do it these days. So get some outside views from outside of your bubble, and make sure that your views aren't quite so biased, and try it out.
That's excellent advice, and thank you for the clarification on that point about the heading of the organization. So I'm sure that our global viewers and listeners are going to benefit from what you did, the excellent advice and points that you just gave them, that don't limit yourself. That is very, very true, and don't have any biases. And I see that, the emerging drive that we see in so many countries of all these individuals, where they want to take their country, what problems to solve. That's absolutely very heartwarming to see that kind of drive everybody has these days. So thank you so much, Pablo, for participating in Risk Roundup today. We appreciate your thoughtful insight on the AI trends in 2020, and even if a single individual or entity can understand the trends and disruption, both constructive as well as destructive, happening, across nations, based on the discussion we had today, this Risk Roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Pablo. So Risk Roundup, a global initiative launched by Risk Group, is a security risk reporting for risk emerging from existing and emerging technologies, technology convergence, and transformation happening across cyberspace, aquaspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to management of threats and peace to the management of conflict, risk management is related to management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. And it's not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secure for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security. So if we build a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage the existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the Risk Roundups, to watch the Risk Roundup video audio podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com, and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.